And for more, not only on Russia's energy sector and the possibility of sanctions, but on the wider view from Moscow. Let's turn now to special correspondent Ryan Chilcote, who is in the Russian capital. So Ryan, hello. We are hearing more and more talk here in the West of an embargo on Russian oil. You've looked into this. What could that mean for the world and for Russia?
Well, I think we saw the answer to that in part on the markets today. So we saw the price of oil go almost $140 a barrel for Brent. That's the benchmark for oil around the world. Just a month or two ago, people were questioning whether oil would go through $100 a barrel. And here we are, an extraordinary increase in price. And you and I were talking about this on Friday. If Russia is unable to export its, let's say, 7.5 million barrels when you take in all the various kinds of crude products, that doesn't necessarily mean if it can't, let's say, export that into the United States and Europe, that it couldn't export it elsewhere. What the market told us today is it doesn't think it can. It thinks that much oil is going to stay off the market, or at least a portion of that oil. Remember, NATO countries buy about half of those 7.5 million barrels. And so less oil on the market, higher price. So all we saw was people on the market today basically trying to predict the future, and it looked pretty bleak when it comes to energy prices. Inside Russia, kind of the same story. The ruble plummeted. We went basically the ruble has lost almost 100%, if you can imagine, of its value since the beginning of the year. It went at one point down to 170 rubles today, came back to around 130 to the dollar. That is people here in Russia, traders saying, hey, we're not sure we're going to be able to sell those barrels of oil abroad. That's bad news for the Russian economy. What it means for Russians is that everything they have to buy from outside of the country is now going to cost that much more. In other words, goods that, let's say, cost 100 rubles just a month ago are now going to cost 200 rubles. In other words, you've got 100% inflation in just a matter of a couple of weeks.
Dramatic changes. Ryan, let me turn you back to the battlefront now. Today was scheduled the third round of talks between the Ukrainians and the Russians. What do we know about what has come out of those talks?
Well, they made a little bit of progress, hopefully, on humanitarian corridors out of some of these conflict zones. But as you know, Judy, that has not been easy going. Big picture, though, very little progress made. We heard from the Kremlin today that this, as they call it here in Russia, special military operation in Ukraine will end the moment that the Ukrainians agree to recognize Crimea and the two separatist republics in the east of the country, agree not to join NATO, and effectively put down their arms and stop fighting. And those are quite simply, or at least have been, non-starters for the Ukrainians.
And finally, Ryan, I know you are talking to folks every day. You're there in Moscow. What is your sense of what ordinary Russian citizens think about what's going on in Ukraine?
I think you've got a really divided society here. Sunday, we had the single largest number of arrests in any day in Russian history. People turning out to protest and almost immediately getting arrested. They're obviously against what's going on in Ukraine. On the other hand, tomorrow is a holiday here. It's International Women's Day. There's people out in the streets everywhere. If they're concerned about what's going on in Ukraine, you certainly can't tell it. The restaurants are packed. People seem to be, to a large extent, ignoring this for whatever reason. Maybe they don't think that they can change what's going on. Maybe they support it. Maybe they believe what they've been hearing about what's going on in Ukraine. There could be a number of reasons, but it's not as if everyone is against what's happening in Ukraine. There actually appears to be a significant amount of apathy or support.
No doubt, all that connected to how much they know, how much they've been allowed to know about what's going on. Ryan Chilcote reporting for us from Moscow. Thank you, Ryan.